I'm Claire Anderson, 35 years old, and until last month, nobody knew I was the hidden owner of Anderson Luxury Hotels. Not even my husband, Michael, had any clue that I was the one behind the beautiful place where his younger brother's wedding was about to happen. So when the wedding planner called me one morning, her words hit me like a storm. "Your husband canceled your invitation," she said carefully, "but he asked us to keep the $50,000 deposit you paid." I didn't scream or cry. Instead, I spoke in the calmest voice I could manage. "Cancel the whole wedding," I replied. She gasped on the other end. "But, ma'am, you're not the bride," I cut her off. "No, I'm not. But I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel chain where the guests are staying. Before I tell you what happened after that moment, I need to go back and explain how my life brought me to this point. I grew up in a small middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. My parents owned a little bed and breakfast. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy and full of warmth. From the time I was a little girl, I was fascinated by the hospitality world. I loved changing the bed sheets, greeting visitors with a smile, and watching how happy people felt when they were treated kindly. My parents worked endlessly, but money was always tight. Even though they struggled, they taught me two things that shaped my life. Hard work pays off, and everyone deserves respect, no matter their social class. 18. I left home for college after earning a scholarship to study business management. Those years were hard. I worked 3 jobs, studied full-time, and lived in a tiny apartment where sleep often felt like a luxury. My meals were cheap and my clothes were old, but I kept reminding myself of my dream to someday build something big in the hospitality industry. During my senior year, my life took a turn. I met Patricia Hayes, a guest lecturer who had built her own small chain of boutique hotels. After class, I asked her questions, lots of them. She noticed my interest and seriousness, and something in me must have stood out to her. A week later, she offered me an internship after graduation. That internship became the foundation of my career. Under Patricia's guidance, I learned everything about hotels, the management, the finances, the staff, the branding, all of it. She believed in me more than I believed in myself at that time. By 25, with her backing and all the savings I had managed to scrape together, I took a big leap. I bought a struggling hotel on the edge of Chicago. Everyone around me thought I was out of my mind, but I wasn't reckless. I had studied the location, the market, and the competition. I knew what I was doing. Within 6 months of rebranding and renovating, that hotel turned a profit. Slowly but steadily, I expanded. Over the next 10 years, I bought more properties, fixed them up, and turned them into something elegant. My chain grew to 15 hotels spread across the country, all known for high-end service and unforgettable guest experiences. I named the chain Anderson Luxury Hotels after my grandmother. By 35, I had achieved more than I had ever imagined. I had money, properties, and recognition in the hospitality world. But I stayed in the shadows. I didn't put my face on advertisements. I didn't attend big, flashy events. I kept a low profile because I had seen how people change when they know you're rich. They stop treating you like a human being and start treating you like a bank. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. That's how I met Michael. We met at an alumni event. I was invited to speak there, but I didn't use my full title. I introduced myself as a hospitality consultant instead of a CEO. Michael was different from anyone I had met before. At 38, he was a history professor who loved medieval architecture. He didn't care about money or status. He spoke passionately about Gothic cathedrals, about the beauty of old buildings, about history preserved in stone. Our first date wasn't at some luxury restaurant, it was at a cozy little coffee shop. We sat for hours, sipping coffee and talking about everything from books to travel. I told him stories about my consulting work, carefully edited versions of my real life, and he listened with genuine interest. With him, I didn't feel like a CEO hiding her secret. I felt like a woman who loved old movies, who collected vintage hotel postcards, who enjoyed simple conversations. Our relationship moved fast. Within a year, Michael proposed to me with a modest ring. It wasn't shiny or expensive, but it meant everything because it came from his savings. I could see his heart in that gesture. I made a choice, then I didn't tell him about my wealth. I wanted our foundation to be built on love, not money. We had a small wedding in a local restaurant, not in one of my hotels. Michael believed I had a decent amount of savings, enough to help us buy a small but nice house. He was grateful. He continued working as a professor, and we began our married life quietly. But I soon noticed something: his family was very different from him. Michael's parents, Edward and Margaret, were very focused on appearances. Edward worked in banking, and Margaret was always busy with charity events and social committees. They lived in a big house in the suburbs and cared deeply about status. Michael's younger brother, Jason, was the complete opposite of Michael. Where Michael chose education and teaching, Jason chased money. He went to business school, worked in real estate, and was always competing with Michael from the start. I felt the sting of how his family treated me. They asked subtle questions about where I came from, about my family's background, about my education. Margaret often dropped comments about women with better breeding or proper family connections. I tried to ignore it, for Michael's sake. But those words stayed with me. After our wedding, I continued running my company under the mask of being a consultant. Michael never questioned why my consulting paid so well, or why I sometimes had to take private calls. He respected my independence. That was one of the things I loved most about him. I believed our love could survive anything, even his family's constant judgment. But I was wrong. 3 years into our marriage, cracks started to show. Michael insisted on weekly Sunday dinners with his parents. Every time we went, I felt like I was walking into enemy territory. Margaret's comments cut like knives, but they always came with a fake smile. "That outfit is certainly unique," she'd say. "It works for your figure, I suppose. Or, your roots are showing. I can recommend my stylist if you can manage the expense." Whenever I told Michael about these comments, he brushed them off. "You're misinterpreting," he'd say. "My mom means well. You're just being sensitive." Then came the night that changed everything. Jason walked into Sunday dinner with a tall, elegant blonde woman by his side. He proudly announced, "Everyone, this is Rachel Morgan. Her father is Thomas Morgan, from Morgan Development Group. And as of last night, she's my fiancée." The whole room lit up with excitement. Rachel came from wealth. She was educated at top schools. She had connections. And she was, in Margaret's words, the perfect match. When Jason announced they had booked the Somerset Grand Hotel for their wedding, my heart nearly stopped. Somerset Grand wasn't just any hotel. It was one of my flagship properties, one I had personally restored with my own hands. Jason smiled smugly as he said, "It's costing a fortune, but Rachel deserves the best." I sat quietly, holding my wine glass, as thoughts spun in my head. Should I reveal the truth? Should I tell them Somerset Grand was mine? Maybe then they would finally respect me. But deep down, I knew the truth. If I told them, they'd only see me differently because of my money, not because of who I was. So I stayed silent, and that silence was the first step toward the storm that was coming a week later. Jason and Rachel came over to our house for dinner. From the moment Rachel stepped inside, I could see the way she looked around. Her eyes scanned our living room with the kind of polite judgment that cut deeper than words. She smiled tightly and said, "It's cozy." Then she ran her hand across one of our bookshelves. "I guess academics don't really need that much space." Jason laughed as if she had said something clever. "You should see the house we're buying," he added proudly. 5,000 square feet, a pool, a wine cellar. Dad's helping us with the down payment. You'll have to come by when it's done." I forced a smile and nodded. Inside, my stomach tightened. When dinner started, the topic turned to wedding costs. Jason complained loudly, waving his fork in the air. The Somerset is bleeding us dry. 50,000 just for the venue and the basic catering package. Can you believe that? Edward shook his head, frowning. These luxury places charge whatever they want. It's robbery, I tell you. I sat there, my lips pressed together, because the pricing was my doing. I had personally approved those numbers. But of course, I couldn't defend it without revealing my secret. Instead, I said gently, maybe I could help. I have a few connections in the hospitality industry through my consulting work. Jason looked straight at me, his tone dismissive. No offense, Claire, but this is a high society wedding. We need someone with real influence. His words stung, but I stayed quiet. The next morning I called Anna, my assistant, and told her to arrange something special. I had her process a private discount for Jason's wedding, lowering the cost and making sure the $50,000 deposit was covered by my company. I told myself it was a gift, a gesture of goodwill. Something they would never know came from me, but in my heart, I knew it was more. It was me, still hoping, still trying to buy my way into their acceptance. As the wedding grew closer, Michael changed too. I noticed him becoming obsessed with fitting in. He spent hours practicing small talk about real estate and politics, subjects he thought would impress Rachel's family. He bought a suit that cost far more than he normally would spend. He worried about which fork to use at the dinner table, about saying the right things. You don't have to do all this, I told him one evening. You're enough, just as you are. He sighed heavily. You don't understand, Claire. This wedding is a big deal. My family has expectations. Rachel's family is important in the business world. We need to make a good impression. His words left me uneasy. For the first time, I felt him slipping away into a world where I didn't belong. Then came the shopping trip with Margaret and Rachel. They invited me along, and I thought maybe this was a chance to connect. But it turned into another humiliation. At a fancy boutique, I found a simple but elegant blue dress. It fit me perfectly and made me feel beautiful. But Margaret wrinkled her nose the moment she saw it. Oh, Claire, that's not really suitable for a wedding of this scale. Perhaps something more subdued. We wouldn't want you to stand out for the wrong reasons. Rachel nodded in agreement. Yes, the family. Photos have a specific look we're aiming for. I nodded, pretending to agree, and carried the dress back into the fitting room. But as I stood behind the curtain, I heard their voices whispering outside. Michael married her before we could say anything, Margaret said softly. She's not really our kind of people, but we'll make do. Just keep her in the background for the photos. My chest tightened. I bit my lip to stop the tears from falling right there in the fitting room. That night I confronted Michael. My voice shook as I told him, your family constantly belittles me. They make me feel like I don't belong, and you say nothing. Do you even see it? He frowned, brushing me off. They're just particular, Claire. You're being too sensitive. They show love differently than your family does. I shook my head. This isn't about different love languages, Michael. This is about respect. He rubbed his temples. This wedding is stressful for everyone. Once it's over, things will go back to normal. But I wasn't sure I wanted things to go back to normal. Still, I tried to believe in us. I tried to convince myself that if I just stayed quiet, if I just kept giving, things would change. 6 weeks before the wedding, Michael started going to family-only planning meetings. At first it was once a week, then twice, then almost every night. Why can't I come? I asked one evening. It's just boring details, he said quickly. Mom thinks it's better to keep the circle small. Too many opinions complicate things. His words didn't sit right with me. A few days later, while organizing the home office, I found a folder labeled wedding. Inside, there was a guest list with a seating chart. I scanned it carefully. At the family table, I Saul, Edward, Margaret, Jason, Rachel, and Michael. But my name was missing. When Michael got home, I held the paper up. Why am I not on the family table? He snatched the paper from my hands. That's just a draft. Nothing's finalized. You shouldn't be going through my things. His defensive tone only deepened my suspicion. Later that week, Margaret called me. She asked about my dress, her voice smooth and polite as always. We want to make sure everyone coordinates. The photos are very important to Rachel. I've chosen a midnight blue dress, I told her. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, well, we were thinking immediate family would stick to pastels and champagne tones. Perhaps you could find something else, something that won't draw attention. Her meaning was clear. I wasn't considered immediate family, too. Weeks later, at the engagement party, things became worse. When we arrived, I noticed Michael had been seated at the family table with his parents, Jason and Rachel. My seat was far away. At a table with distant cousins and some of Jason's colleagues, there must be a mistake. I whispered to Michael. It's not a big deal, he said quickly. Don't make a scene. It's just for dinner. I sat there through the night, surrounded by strangers, watching my husband laugh with his family while pretending I didn't exist. Occasionally, he glanced at me with a guilty smile, but he made no effort to include me. After that night, Michael became more secretive. He started taking calls in another room. He put a password on his phone, something he had never done before. Every time I asked what was going on, he brushed me off with vague answers about wedding responsibilities. One day, I called Anna at the office to check on the wedding arrangements. I had to keep my identity hidden, so I played along like a regular client. Everything's proceeding as planned, she assured me. Though there have been some unusual last-minute changes to the guest list and seating arrangements. What kind of changes? I asked, trying to sound casual. Nothing major, she replied. Just internal family adjustments. But I can send you the updated chart if you'd like. When I opened the email, my heart sank. Not only was I missing from the family table again, but I was missing from the entire guest list. It was as if I didn't exist. That night, I overheard Michael outside on the phone. His voice was low, urgent. Mom, I know, but I haven't figured out how to handle the situation with Claire yet. Yes, I understand how important this is. No. She doesn't suspect anything. I'll take care of it. I promise. My chest tightened as I pressed my hand over my mouth. The situation with Claire. That was me. I had become the problem in their eyes. The next morning, while Michael was showering, I did something I had never done before. I checked his phone. I found text messages between him and Jason. Have you solved the Claire problem yet? Jason had written, working on it, Michael replied. It's complicated, uncomplicated. This wedding is too important. My hands trembled as I set the phone back down. My name, my life, my marriage reduced to a problem to be solved. That was when I realized I wasn't imagining it. They truly were trying to erase me. From that moment on, I couldn't sleep at night. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my husband, the man who promised to protect me and love me, could treat me like I was disposable. I told myself maybe I was overreacting, maybe there was an explanation. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was very wrong. I needed to talk to someone I trusted. So the next morning, I called my best friend, Laura Bennett. Unlike me, Laura had never liked Michael's family. She always said they looked down on me and that one day they would show their true colors. When I told her everything, the phone calls, the missing name on the guest list. The way Michael brushed me aside, she didn't hesitate. Claire, trust your gut, she said firmly. Something's going on. If they're trying to cut you out of this wedding, you need to face it head on. Don't let them push you into the shadows. I hesitated, but what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid like Michael says? Then at least you'll know, she replied. But I don't think you're wrong. And honestly, It's time you stood up for yourself. Enough is enough. Her words gave me strength, but I still felt torn. A few days later, I went to the boutique for my final dress fitting. When I arrived, Margaret, Rachel, and 3 of the bridesmaids were there, sipping champagne in matching robes. The moment I walked in, Margaret's smile froze. "Claire, what are you doing here?" I frowned, confused. "I have my final fitting today. The boutique confirmed it yesterday." Rachel and Margaret exchanged quick glances. "There must have been a mix-up," Rachel said smoothly. "Today, it's just for the wedding party." "But I'm family too," I said softly. My voice shook, but I meant every word. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Nobody argued with me, but nobody agreed either. I felt the sting of rejection so strongly, I could hardly breathe. I left the boutique and sat in my car, tears rolling down my cheeks. For the first time in years, I felt powerless, like no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for Michael's family. But then something inside me shifted. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and drove straight to my office. I wasn't just Michael's wife. I wasn't just a woman being pushed aside. I was Claire Anderson, the CEO of Anderson Luxury Hotels. The woman who had built everything from the ground up. The woman they had no idea about. And if they thought they could erase me from this wedding, they were about to learn the truth. When I reached my office, I opened my email and found something waiting for me that confirmed all my fears. Anna had forwarded me a message she thought I should see. It was from Margaret to the wedding planner. The message said, "Please ensure Claire Anderson is removed from all arrangements. Michael will be attending alone." Anna had written a note at the bottom. "Miss Anderson, I thought you should be aware of this, since it concerns the Morgan Anderson wedding at Somerset Grand." My heart sank. It was right there in black and white. They had uninvited me, and my own husband was part of it. The pain quickly turned into anger. They had crossed a line I could never forgive. No more hiding. No more pretending. The morning of the wedding finally came. I woke up to see Michael packing his tuxedo and toiletries. I looked around and noticed something missing. There was no garment bag for my dress. No shoes. No jewelry laid out. Nothing that suggested he expected me to be by his side. "You're not taking my things," I said, my voice steady but cold. Michael froze, then turned slowly toward me. "Claire, we need to talk." "Yes, we do," I answered. "You've uninvited me from the wedding, haven't you?" His shoulders slumped, and he sighed. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it," I said sharply. "Explain why the wedding planner received instructions to remove me from the guest list." His eyes widened. "How did you know that?" "So it's true," I said. The words felt like knives in my throat. Michael sat down on the edge of the bed. "It's a family decision. Jason and Rachel are worried about appearances. There will be very important people there. Business partners, clients, high society people. They don't think you'd fit in." I stared at him, stunned. "Not good enough for them. That's what you're saying." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's not personal. You didn't grow up in that world. Mom thinks you might say something. Inappropriate, I repeated, my voice rising. "You know what I mean?" he said quickly. "You don't know all their rules, all their ways. They're just worried about being embarrassed." Every word he spoke cut me deeper. 3 years of marriage, and this was what my husband thought of me. "And you agree with them?" I asked. It wasn't a question, it was the truth hanging. "Between us, I'm caught in the middle," he said defensively. "This wedding is important for Jason's career, for my family's reputation. It's just one day, Claire. I'll make it up to you. After the wedding, we'll take that trip to Maine you wanted. Just you and me." I stared at him in disbelief. "One day? You think this is about one day?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Go," I whispered. "Your family is waiting." Relief washed over his face. like he was glad I wasn't fighting harder. "Thank you for understanding," he said softly. He kissed my cheek and left tuxedo bag over his shoulder, while I stood there frozen in silence. The moment the door shut, my knees gave out. I collapsed on the bed, sobbing into my hands. I let the grief wash over me for an hour, crying for the love I thought I had, for the respect I never got, for the betrayal that broke me. But then I sat up, wiped my tears, and took a deep breath. Enough was enough. Just as I was reaching for my phone to call Anna, it rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Is this Mrs. Anderson?" a polished voice asked. Double quotes. "Yes, this is Claire," I replied cautiously. "This is Sophia Chen from Elite Events. I'm the wedding planner for the Anderson Morgan wedding at Somerset Grand Hotel. I just need to confirm. You understand that you will not be attending today's events." Her tone was professional, but the audacity made my blood boil. "I'm aware my husband canceled my invitation," I said flatly. "Yes, excellent," she replied. "Also, Mr. Anderson mentioned that despite your absence, you would like the $50,000 deposit you provided to remain with the venue. I just need your verbal confirmation for our records." I froze. The money. The deposit I had secretly paid through my company. He wanted to keep it, even after pushing me out. And that moment, something inside me snapped. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly, my voice firm and commanding. "Actually, I want you to cancel the entire wedding." There was silence on the other end. Then Sophia gasped. "Excuse me, cancel everything," I said clearly. "The venue, the catering, the hotel accommodations, all of it." "But, ma'am," Sophia stuttered, "you're not the bride. You don't have the authority," I cut her off. "No, I'm not the bride. But I am Claire Anderson, CEO and owner of Anderson Luxury Hotels. I own Somerset Grand. I own the catering company. I own the hotels where the guests are staying. And I'm telling you the wedding is cancelled." The line went quiet. When Sophia finally spoke again, her voice shook. "There must be some mistake. The only mistake," I interrupted, "was thinking I'd keep letting this family disrespect me. Please inform the staff that the event is cancelled, effective immediately. I'll be at the hotel soon too. Handle any questions." "But the guests," she whispered. "They'll be arriving in 3 hours. The Morgans will be devastated. The social implications, that's not my concern," I said coldly. "I've made my decision." I hung up, my hands trembling, but for the first time in weeks, I felt powerful again. After hanging up on Sophia, I didn't sit down. I didn't second-guess myself. I grabbed my phone and called Anthony, the general manager of Somerset Grand. "Anthony," I said firmly, "this is Claire. The Anderson Morgan wedding scheduled for today is cancelled. Begin informing the staff. Immediately." His voice wavered. "Miss Anderson, are you sure? Everything is already set up." "I'm sure," I replied. "Also, call Rachel at our catering branch and have her halt all food preparation. I'll be there within the hour." "Yes, ma'am," he said quickly. Next, I dialed Anna. "I need all the documentation for the Morgan Anderson wedding," I instructed. "Every payment, especially the $50,000 deposit covered by corporate funds. Send it to my personal email right now." "Of course, Miss Anderson. Is everything all right?" she asked carefully. "It will be," I told her though. My chest still burned with anger. "It will be very soon." I walked into my closet and chose a tailored black suit I kept for business meetings that required authority. I added my grandmother's pearl necklace, something I always wore when I needed strength. My makeup was flawless, my hair neat. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in weeks, I saw myself again, not the wife begging for scraps of respect, but the CEO who built an empire from nothing. As I drove to Somerset Grand, I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Doubt crept in for a moment. Was I going too far? Was canceling the wedding too extreme? But then Michael's words echoed in my head. It's not personal. If my own husband's betrayal wasn't personal, then nothing was. By the time I pulled into the hotel's executive parking area, my doubts had vanished. Somerset Grand stood tall and stunning, its historic stonework glowing under the morning sun. Normally, seeing it filled me with pride. Today, it felt like a battlefield. When I entered through the service door, chaos already buzzed through the air. Staff members whispered into headsets, flower arrangements sat half-finished, and tables were only half set. Anthony rushed toward me. "Ms. Anderson," he said, lowering his voice. "We've started the cancellation process, but the wedding party has already arrived for photos. The groom's mother is demanding to speak with management." "Where are they now?" I asked. "The Wellington room," he answered. "They're using it as a staging area." "Good," I said. "I'll handle it." Anthony gave me a worried look, but he nodded. I took a deep breath and walked down the hall. My heels clicked against the marble floor with each step, echoing like a drumbeat. By the time I reached the Wellington room, I was ready. A staff member opened the door for me. "Good morning, Miss Anderson," she said respectfully. Inside the scene was frantic. Margaret was flailing her arms at a young event coordinator, her voice sharp with anger. Jason was pacing in his tuxedo, while Rachel sat in a chair, her white gown spilling around her like a cloud, mascara streaking her cheeks. Edward stood by the window, barking into his phone about contracts and legal action. Michael was nowhere in sight. Nobody noticed me at first, until Anthony stepped in behind me and cleared his throat. "Excuse me, everyone. Miss Anderson is here." To address the situation, the room went quiet. All eyes turned toward me. Confusion flickered across their faces. Margaret stepped forward, her tone sharp. "Claire, what on earth are you doing here? And why are you dressed like that? Did you have something to do with this disaster?" I stayed calm. "I think we should discuss this privately." I turned to Anthony. "Please ask the staff to leave the room." As the staff filed out, Jason marched toward me. His face was red, his voice loud. "What the hell's going on? Who do you think you are showing up here like this?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm exactly who I've always been," I said calmly, "though maybe not who you thought I was." The door opened again, and Michael walked in. His steps slowed when he saw me. His face went pale. "Claire, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Rachel stood up, her gown rustling. "Can someone please explain what's happening?" "They're telling me the wedding is cancelled. The venue, the catering, everything." "That's correct," I said. My voice was steady, clear. Jason's jaw dropped. "You. What do you have to do with any of this?" Edward ended his phone call and stomped forward. "I demand to speak to the manager of this establishment immediately. This is a breach of contract." "You're speaking to her," I replied, nodding at Anthony. "Anthony, please tell them who I am." Anthony cleared his throat nervously. "This is Miss Claire Anderson, the founder and CEO of Anderson Luxury Hotels, which includes Somerset Grand and 13 other properties nationwide. She also owns Anderson Catering, the company providing today's service." Silence filled the room. For the first time in years, they were speechless. "That's impossible," Margaret whispered. Her eyes darted over me, as though seeing me for the first time. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. "These are the documents showing the $50,000 deposit for this wedding, paid by my company. The same deposit Michael confirmed should be kept even after canceling my invitation." Michael's face drained of color. "Claire, I can explain, can you?" I asked sharply. "Can you explain why you thought it was acceptable to uninvite your wife from a family wedding, but keep her money? Can you explain 3 years of allowing your family to belittle me while you stood silently by?" Jason's voice cracked as he interrupted. "Why to own this hotel? All this time you've been what, pretending to be normal?" "I've never pretended," I said firmly. I chose not to reveal everything because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for what I own. Margaret sank into a chair, her hands trembling. But your parents, they only ran a bed and breakfast. They did, I said proudly. And I built on their legacy. I worked hard, I built this chain, and I made it into something I'm proud of. Edward suddenly smiled, his tone changing instantly. Ah, dear, clearly this is just a misunderstanding. We had no idea about your position. Truly, if we had known, that's exactly the problem, I cut in. You judged me based on what you thought I lacked. You decided I wasn't worthy of this family. And Michael, you went along with it. Michael stepped closer, his voice soft. Claire, please, let's talk about this privately. No, I said firmly. Not this time. For too long, everything has been done behind my back. This conversation happens here, in front of everyone. Rachel suddenly spoke up, her voice shaking. She's right. This is awful. Jason, you told me Claire couldn't come because she had a prior commitment. You lied to me. Jason's face turned red. That's what Michael told us. All eyes shifted to Michael, who looked trapped. Mom and Dad thought it would be better this way, he stammered. They were worried about appearances with the Morgans. I didn't want to upset anyone. You didn't want to upset them, I said quietly. But you had no problem betraying me. The air in the room grew heavy. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Finally, Anthony stepped back inside. Miss Anderson, guests are starting to arrive. What should we tell them? Every eye turned to me, waiting for my answer. This was the moment of truth. I could follow through with the cancellation and ruin them socially, or I could choose another path. Rachel stood and took a shaky breath. Claire, I had no idea they uninvited you. That's not the kind of family I want to marry into. She turned to Jason, her voice sharp. How could you do this? How could any of you think this was acceptable? Jason stammered. Rachel, baby, we can fix this, can we? She demanded. Because right now, I'm not sure I want to marry into a family that treats people this way. Her words shocked Jason more than anything else. Margaret rushed forward, her tone desperate. Claire, dear, we're family. Surely we can work this out. Whatever issues there have been, let's move past them. I looked around the room. At each of them, the people who had dismissed me, disrespected me, erased me. And I finally spoke. The wedding can proceed, I said slowly, on one condition. Every single one of you gives me a real apology. And from this moment on, the disrespect ends. I will not be treated like an outsider in my own family again. The room fell silent after my words. You could almost hear the sound of everyone breathing, heavy and uneven, like the air itself had turned to stone. Edward was the first to move. He stepped forward, his face stiff but trying to look sincere. Claire, he said, his voice lower than usual, I want to apologize. Truly, we misjudged you. We treated you unfairly, and that was wrong. It was our loss. I am sorry, I studied his face. He was a banker, a man used to negotiations. His apology sounded polished, almost like a business pitch, but at least it was direct. Next came Margaret. She clasped her hands together, her voice shaking in a way that didn't feel entirely real. I'm deeply sorry, Claire. I was short-sighted. I should have welcomed you into this family from the start. I let my own biases get in the way. I hope, in time, you'll forgive me. Her words were smoother than her actions had ever been, but still, they were words I had been waiting to hear for years. Jason glanced at Rachel before finally meeting my eyes. Claire, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve the way we treated you. I was wrong. I let pride and family pressure get the better of me. Regardless of who you are or what you own, it wasn't right. His tone surprised me. For the first time, I saw something other than arrogance on his face. I saw shame. Then, slowly, Michael stepped forward. His eyes were red, his voice unsteady. Claire, I have failed you, as a husband, as a partner. I should have defended you. I should have protected you. Instead, I stood by while my family disrespected you. Worse, I joined them. I betrayed your trust. And for that, I am so deeply sorry. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch, letting them all sit in the weight of their words. Then finally, I nodded once. Anthony, I said, turning to the manager, the wedding will proceed. Inform the staff. Relief washed across the room like a wave, but I lifted my hand. However, there will be changes. Everyone froze again. I will be seated with my husband at the family table, where I belong. And from this day forward, I expect to be treated with respect, both as a family member and as the owner of this establishment. Is that clear? Margaret nodded quickly. Of course, dear. Absolutely. I turned to Anthony again. Please have someone bring me my other suit, the blue one. It matches the wedding colors. I believe it will fit the family photos just fine. From the corner of my eye, I saw Margaret's jaw tighten, but she said nothing. Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. Claire, please. Can we talk privately? Just the two of us. Not now, I said firmly. For now, we present a united front. Later, we'll talk. His face fell, but he nodded. He knew the threat in my voice. I wasn't sure if our marriage could survive this. Rachel surprised me next. She walked toward me, her gown brushing the floor, her eyes soft with sincerity. Thank you, she said quietly. Thank you for not canceling everything, even though you had every right to. I hope we can start over. I'd like to know the real you. Her words caught me off guard. For the first time, I believed she wasn't like the rest of them. I gave her a small nod. I'd like that too. As preparations resumed, Michael tried to take my hand. I pulled away gently. Not now, Michael, I whispered. Today, you'll play the role of the loving husband, and I'll play the supportive wife. Tomorrow, we'll decide if that role becomes real again. The shift in power was clear. For the first time since joining this family, I wasn't on the outside. They weren't looking at me as someone to endure. They were looking at me with a mixture of fear, respect, and something new. The wedding ceremony went ahead, but there was an undercurrent of tension that only those of us in the Wellington room could feel. I sat in the front row where immediate family belonged, dressed in my midnight blue suit. Michael sat beside me, trying to hold my hand every few minutes. Sometimes I let him. Other times, I pulled away. During the vows, I couldn't help but think back to our own wedding day. I remembered the promises we made to each other to stand by one another, to protect each other. Now those promises felt fragile, like glass already cracked. At the reception, I moved through the crowd with grace. Guests complimented the venue, the decor, the food. I smiled and thanked them, never revealing my true connection. This was Jason and Rachel's day, and I wouldn't overshadow it with my story. But Michael followed me closely all evening, his presence heavy. He leaned in during the first dance. Claire, please. Can we talk, just for 5 minutes? I kept my smile fixed, my eyes on the dance floor. About what? About everything. I need to explain. Your actions already explained enough, I whispered back. He looked wounded, but I didn't give him more. During dinner, Edward stood to give a toast. He congratulated Jason and Rachel, of course, but then, to everyone's surprise, he added, and I'd like to extend a special thanks to my daughter, Claire, whose generosity made this celebration possible. The guests clapped politely, unaware of the storm that had unfolded earlier. Margaret's smile tightened like she had bitten into something sour. Michael's shoulders slumped with shame. Later, Michael gave his best man's speech. At one point, he said, Jason, you're lucky to have found someone who values honesty and loyalty. Some of us are still learning how important it is to stand by the ones we love, no matter the pressure. His eyes found mine across the room. It was a public apology, hidden in plain sight. But I didn't react. I wasn't ready to give him what he wanted. As the night went on, I excused myself to check the kitchen. Michael followed me into the hallway, his voice low and desperate. Claire, please. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. I sighed, then led him into my private office at the hotel, a space he had never seen before. He looked around, his eyes wide. The polished wood desk, the city skyline view, the framed photos of renovations. This has been your world all along, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? I crossed my arms. Why didn't you stand by me? He sank into a chair, defeated. I have no excuse. I was weak. I let my family's opinions guide me. I told myself it was just one day, that leaving you out wouldn't matter in the long run. I shook my head. It wasn't just one day, Michael. It was 3 years of letting them belittle me. 3 years of you choosing their approval over my dignity. He covered his face with his hands. I know, and I regret it more than I can say. When we first met, I admired you so much for your intelligence, your kindness, your independence. I thought I had found someone who loved me for myself, not for status. And now I see how much I've destroyed. This isn't about money or status, I said softly. It's about respect. Loyalty. You were supposed to be my partner. I want to be, he whispered. Tell me how to fix this. I looked at him for a long time, sadness heavy in my chest. I don't know if it can be fixed. I need time to think. Time to decide if this marriage can survive what you did. His voice cracked. Are you leaving me? I'm not making that decision tonight. We'll get through this wedding. After that, I'll be staying in the city for a while. Alone, he stared at me, broken. You have an apartment I didn't know about. I nodded. There are many things you don't know about me, Michael. That's the problem, you never really tried to know me. After that conversation in my office, I walked back to the reception alone. Michael followed a few steps behind, but I didn't look back. I plastered on a polite smile and played my role, the supportive wife, the gracious hostess. Guests kept complimenting the venue, the food, the flowers. I thanked them warmly, never once letting them know I had orchestrated all of it. But as the evening went on, I noticed whispers starting to ripple through the crowd. It happened after a man from Rachel's side of the family approached me. Claire Anderson, he said, squinting as though trying to place me. We met at the hospitality conference in Chicago last year. I didn't realize you were connected to the Anderson family. I smiled politely, but his words spread like wildfire. Soon, I caught curious glances from people at nearby tables. One whispered to another, then another. My identity was leaking out, piece by piece. Margaret cornered me in the ladies' room later, her smile stretched tight. You could have told us, Claire. All this time, we thought you were just… Well, it doesn't matter now. We're family, after all. I met her, eyes in the mirror. Are we, Margaret? Because this morning, I wasn't family enough to be at this wedding. Her smile faltered. That was a misunderstanding. Don't blame Michael, I said coldly. He was just carrying out the family's plan. I heard you tell Rachel. I wasn't your kind of people. Has my bank account suddenly changed that assessment? Her cheeks flushed. People say things they don't mean. Surely you understand family dynamics can be complicated. I shook my head. I understand respect. And I haven't received it from this family until today, when you found out who I really am. She had no response. For once, Margaret Anderson was speechless. Later that night, Jason stumbled toward me at the bar. He'd clearly had too much to drink. His words slurred as he said, "So my brother married a secret millionaire. All this time, I thought I was the successful one." Success isn't about bank accounts, Jason, I said calmly. Easy for you to say when you have both, he muttered bitterly. Then he let out a humorless laugh. You know what's funny? I was always jealous of Michael. Even when I thought he'd married down, I envied how happy he seemed with you. Mom and Dad pushed me toward Rachel because of her family connections. I do love her, but it always felt like pressure, like I had to prove something. His honesty surprised me. For once, his walls dropped, and I saw the boy underneath the arrogance, the boy desperate for approval. And now, he continued, swaying slightly, I don't even know what to think. Michael betrayed the one real thing in his life just to please our parents. I'm not sure I want to follow that example. I didn't answer. Some lessons he'd have to learn on his own. When the reception ended, Michael asked softly, Will you come home with me tonight? I shook my head. No, I'll be staying in the penthouse upstairs. His face crumbled, but he didn't argue. The next morning, Edward arranged a family breakfast in one of the hotel's private dining rooms. The atmosphere was tense, thick with forced smiles and stiff conversation. Michael looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his hair messy. Rachel was polite but distant with Jason. Margaret tried to keep the mood light, but her words rang hollow. Claire, dear, she said in a bright tone, we must have you over for lunch soon. I'd love to hear more about your business ventures. I'll check my schedule, I replied coolly. Edward leaned closer, lowering his voice. Perhaps we could discuss some synergies between my investment group and your hotels. I have several clients who might be interested in partnerships. I smiled. Politely, my executive team handles all investments, Edward. But I'll connect you with our development director. Michael sat silently, clearly uncomfortable with how quickly his parents shifted from rejecting me to wanting to profit from me. As breakfast ended, Rachel pulled me aside. Her eyes looked tired, but her voice was steady. Thank you again for yesterday. Despite everything, the wedding was beautiful. And I want you to know I didn't know they uninvited you. That's not the kind of family I thought I was marrying into. I studied her for a moment. What kind of family did you think it was? I asked gently. She sighed. One that valued loyalty and connection, not just appearances. I have some thinking to do about my own marriage, I think. I squeezed her hand. Remember, Rachel, the foundation matters more than the facade. When I watched the newlyweds leave for their honeymoon, a strange mix of emotions swirled inside me, anger at the betrayal, sadness for what I might lose, but also something else. Liberation. For 3 years, I had been shrinking myself to fit into their world. Now, they finally saw who I really was, and for the first time, I had the power to decide whether they deserved a place in my life at all. 3 months after the wedding, I was living in my penthouse downtown. The space reflected me in ways our old house never could. Art I'd collected on my travels, shelves full of books on business and architecture, and vintage postcards from hotels around the world. It was mine. Twice a week, I met with Dr. Lawson, a therapist who specialized in relationship trauma. She helped me unpack everything I'd been through. One session, she leaned forward and asked, You compromised your identity to protect a relationship that wasn't strong enough to survive honesty. What does that tell you about the foundation you and Michael built? Her question cut deep. Had I done this to myself? By hiding who I truly was, had I allowed this marriage to be built on half-truths? I wanted to be loved for me, I explained softly. Not for my success, not for my money. And yet, she said gently, you never gave him the chance to love all of you. Relationships require vulnerability from both sides. Her words didn't excuse Michael's betrayal, but they forced me to face my own choices. Meanwhile, Michael's attempts at reconciliation were constant. He sent long letters admitting his failures. He delivered small gifts, things that showed he remembered my interests, my passions. He respected my request for space, but he never stopped trying. One letter said, I've started therapy. I'm learning about family systems, about why I always sought their approval. I'm not making excuses, Claire. I just want to understand how I failed you and how I can be better. After 2 months of silence, I agreed to meet him at a little cafe, the same place where we'd had our first date. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked more grounded, more vulnerable. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice full of emotion. I'm not making promises. I warned. I'm still processing everything. I know, he said. I just want a chance to show you I can be the husband you deserve. For the next hour, he told me about the changes he was making. He said he had confronted his parents for the first time in his life, setting boundaries they never expected. He told me he'd joined a support group for people with controlling families, and then he told me something that surprised me. He had turned down a prestigious academic position his father had arranged. I realized it was just another way of letting them control me, he admitted. I've lived my whole life chasing their approval. Even my career was about what would impress my dad. And I dragged you into that dysfunction. I listened carefully, impressed by his honesty, but still cautious. Words are easy, Michael, I said quietly. Actions take time. I know, he said, his eyes steady. I'm asking for time to prove it. I didn't answer right away. I sipped my coffee and let the silence sit between us. As Michael worked on himself, I focused on my own life. For the first time in years, I felt free to live without shrinking myself. I spent more time with my friends, especially Laura, who had been warning me for years about Michael's family. I reconnected with people I had lost touch with during my marriage. People who reminded me of who I was before I tried so hard to fit into someone else's world. I also reconnected with my own family. I visited my parents more often, and they reminded me of the girl who had once dreamed big while changing sheets in a small bed and breakfast. I realized how much I had pushed them to the sidelines while juggling my business and my marriage. I didn't want to lose myself like that again. Asterisk at work. I threw myself into new projects. I started a scholarship fund for young people who wanted to study hospitality but couldn't afford it. I wanted to give them the chance I once had, the same kind of break Patricia Hayes had given me years ago. It felt good to invest in people who reminded me of my younger self, hungry, determined, and full of dreams. Unexpectedly, I also started hearing from Rachel. A few weeks after her honeymoon, she reached out. Claire, her message said, I know this might feel strange, but I can't stop thinking about what happened before the wedding. Can we talk? At first I hesitated. Rachel was part of the family that had excluded me, but curiosity got the better of me, so we met for coffee. She looked different, less polished, less perfect. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something softer. Claire, she said, wrapping her hands around her cup, I can't stop thinking about the way they treated you. The way they lied to me about why you weren't at the wedding. It makes me question everything. I studied her carefully. You didn't know? I asked. She shook her head. No, Jason told me you had another commitment, that you couldn't make it. I believed him. But then I saw your face that day, and the way you stood up for yourself. I realized they'd been hiding things from me too, and it scared me. Her honesty disarmed me. I expected her to defend them, but instead, she admitted her own doubts. I thought I was marrying into a prestigious family, she confessed. But now I see how shallow their values are. It makes me wonder if I made a mistake. Our conversation flowed easily after that. She told me about the pressure she felt to live up to her family's name, about the expectations placed on her, since she was a girl. For the first time, I realized she and I weren't so different. We had both been measured against standards set by others, and we had both felt the sting of judgment. That first coffee meeting turned into another, then another. Soon Rachel and I were meeting regularly. It was strange, becoming friends with my sister-in-law, but it also felt natural. She wanted honesty, and I could give her that one day. Over lunch, she admitted, I'm not sure I can stay in this marriage. Jason's priorities aren't about us. They're about impressing his parents, climbing higher, being seen as important. I don't know if I want that life. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Listen, Rachel, whatever you decide, make sure the foundation is real. Don't do what I did. Don't hide who you are to keep the peace. It doesn't work. Sooner or later, the cracks show. She nodded, her eyes watery. You're stronger than I thought, Claire. stronger than all of them combined. Her words stayed with me. For years, Michael's family had tried to convince me I was less. But here was Rachel, someone raised in privilege, seeing me for what I really was. It was both validating and healing. Meanwhile, Michael continued reaching out. He asked if I would consider couples therapy. At first, I resisted. But after 6 months of separation, I agreed, with strict conditions. We'll go to therapy every week, I told him firmly. You will keep boundaries with your family, no excuses. And most importantly, we'll rebuild our home together. A home that reflects both of us, not just one side. Michael agreed instantly. I'll do whatever it takes, Claire. I don't want to lose you. The therapy sessions were hard. There were tears, arguments, and long silences. Michael admitted things I had always suspected that he had lived. His whole life craving his parents' approval, even when it meant hurting me. He confessed he was terrified of disappointing them, terrified of stepping outside their world. And I admitted my part too, that by hiding my success, I had built a marriage on half-truths, that I had hoped love alone would be enough, but love, without honesty, can't last. It was painful, but it was also freeing. The renovation of our house became a metaphor for our relationship. We tore down walls, both literally and emotionally. We redesigned spaces so they felt like ours, not just his family's influence. Michael surprised me one day by suggesting we turn his study into a home office for me. I want your world to be part of this house too, he said softly. That small gesture meant more than any apology. Still, I remained cautious. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. About 6 months after we started therapy, Margaret called, with an invitation. We'd love to have you both for dinner, she said. It's time we move forward as a family. I hesitated, but Michael squeezed my hand and said, if they disrespect you, we'll leave together. No discussion. That's non-negotiable. His words gave me strength, so I agreed. The dinner was awkward from the start. Margaret was overly complimentary, praising everything from my outfit to my business sense. Edward tried to discuss investment opportunities again, until Michael interrupted firmly. We're not here to talk about business, Dad. Jason was quieter than usual, almost subdued. He barely looked at Rachel, who seemed even more distant than before. At one point, Margaret made a sly comment. Claire, you really had us fooled, with your secret identity. Quite the performance. Before I could respond, Michael leaned forward. Mom, that's exactly the kind of comment we talked about. Claire didn't deceive anyone. She chose privacy. And her choices deserve respect. Margaret blinked, shocked. I was just making conversation. No, Michael said firmly. You were trying to frame her integrity as manipulation, and it stops now. I squeezed his hand under the table, for the first time in our marriage. I felt like he was truly standing beside me. Driving home that night, Michael asked, did I handle that okay? I don't want to overstep. It was perfect, I said softly, and I meant it. For the first time in years. I believed maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us. Almost a year had passed since Jason and Rachel's wedding. Life had changed so much in that time that sometimes I barely recognized myself for the woman I had once been. I was stronger now, steadier. I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't afraid to demand it. My business was thriving. The new scholarship program had already sent its first group of students off to college, and I couldn't have been prouder. Anderson Luxury Hotels had just opened its 14th property, a breathtaking resort on the California coast. Michael and I were slowly rebuilding. Couples therapy continued, and while it wasn't easy, I could see real effort from him. He set boundaries with his parents, something I never thought I'd live to see. He even missed one of Edward's big company dinners because he said, I promised Claire we'd spend the evening together, and my marriage comes first now. When he told me that, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I realized I was starting to believe him again. Rachel and I had become closer to she often called me late at night when Jason was working late, or ignoring her feelings. I listened, I advised when I could. But mostly I reminded her she had the right to expect more from her marriage. Then came the night of my company's annual gala. It was always the biggest event of the IRA celebration of our employees, our partners, and our achievements. This time, I wanted to make it bigger than ever. It would be held at Somerset Grand, in the very ballroom where Jason and Rachel's reception had taken place. It felt symbolic, like reclaiming a space that once represented betrayal and turning it into a stage for my triumph. I spent weeks preparing for the event. My team worked tirelessly on every detail: floral arrangements, menu selections, live music. It wasn't just about glitz and glamour. I wanted every employee, from housekeeping to management, to feel valued and celebrated the night of the gala. I wore a gown that made me feel powerful, a deep emerald green silk dress, cut perfectly to my figure, with a diamond pendant Michael had given me as a peace offering months earlier. I arrived early to greet the staff and check every corner of the ballroom as guests began to arrive. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement. People mingled, glasses clinked, and soft jazz floated through the air. Michael stayed close to me, but not in the clingy way he once had. Instead, he seemed proud, almost protective, as though he finally understood the weight of who I was. To my surprise, Margaret and Edward walked in. Jason and Rachel followed a few minutes later. I hadn't invited them personally, but as part of Michael's family, they had received automatic invitations. I felt my body tense, but Michael squeezed my hand. "Remember what we agreed," he whispered. "If they step out of line, we walk away together." I nodded, steadied myself, and greeted them politely. Margaret's smile was wide, almost too wide. "Claire, darling, this is absolutely stunning. You've outdone yourself." "Thank you," I said smoothly. Edward clapped Michael on the back. "Son, you must be proud to stand beside such a powerhouse of a woman." Michael looked at me with genuine pride. "I am." Jason and Rachel were quieter. Rachel hugged me warmly, whispering, "You look incredible." Jason just nodded, avoiding eye contact. Dinner was served, and the speeches began. I had prepared one that would both celebrate our accomplishments and acknowledge the challenges of the past year. When I stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, some familiar, some not. Michael sat near the front, his eyes locked on me. Margaret and Edward sat stiffly, unsure what to expect. Jason and Rachel leaned in, waiting. "Good evening, everyone," I began. My voice was calm, confident. "Tonight, we celebrate not just another year of success, but the resilience and dedication that got us here." Anderson Luxury Hotels began as a dream rooted in the small bed and breakfast my parents once ran. They taught me that hospitality isn't about wealth or luxury. It's about making people feel seen, respected, and valued. I paused, letting my words sink in. This year has tested me personally and professionally, but it has also reminded me of something important. Respect is the foundation of every relationship, whether in business, in family, or in marriage. Without respect, everything falls apart. With it, even the deepest wounds can heal. I caught Michael's eyes then. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I continued, "That's why tonight is about more than business. It's about celebrating every single person who makes this company what it is. From the executives to the front desk staff, from the chefs to the housekeepers, you are the heart of Anderson Hotels. This is your success as much as mine." The audience erupted in applause. Some employees even stood, cheering. My chest swelled with pride. As I stepped down from the podium, Margaret's expression was frozen. For once, she couldn't disguise the fact that she was shaken. Edward clapped politely, but his eyes darted between Michael and me, as though trying to calculate what this shift meant for his family's influence. Later that evening, Rachel found me near the bar. "Claire," she said softly, "that speech, it gave me chills. You're right about respect. It made me realize I've been letting Jason treat me the way his parents treated you." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Then don't settle, Rachel. You deserve a marriage built on respect, not just appearances." Her eyes welled up. "You're braver than I am." "Maybe not," I said gently. "Maybe you just haven't found your moment yet." Meanwhile, Michael stayed close to me all night, not out of fear, but out of pride. When the evening wound down, he whispered, "I've never been more proud to be your husband. And I don't mean proud of your success. I mean proud of you. The woman who never gave up on herself, even when I failed her." For the first time, I felt his words sink in as truth, not just an apology. The gala ended late, but as I stood in the empty ballroom afterward, looking at the chandeliers and the polished floors, I realized something. I no longer needed Michael's family's approval. I didn't even crave it anymore. What I had, my work, my friends, myself, was enough. And anyone who wanted to be in my life had to meet me there. The gala marked a turning point, not just for me, but for the entire Anderson family. After that night, things shifted. Edward tried harder than ever to connect with me, but I kept him at arm's length. Every conversation with him circled back to opportunities and partnerships. It was obvious he cared less about me as a person and more about what my influence could bring him. I learned to smile politely and redirect the conversation, but I never let him in. Margaret softened too, though not in ways I completely trusted. She started sending me invitations to charity luncheons and garden parties. At first, I declined every single one, but eventually, I attended one just to see how she would behave. She introduced me proudly to her friends. "This is my daughter-in-law, Claire, the brilliant woman behind Anderson Luxury Hotels." Her words made me smile on the outside, but inside, I remembered all the times she had called me not their kind of people. Now that she knew the truth, she wanted to show me off. I promised myself I would never forget the difference, but the real changes came with Michael and Rachel. Michael was more present than he had ever been. He came to therapy willingly, not just because I asked, but because he wanted to. He opened up about his childhood, about how he was raised to equate obedience with love. He admitted that for most of his life, he had been too afraid to challenge his parents. One session, he turned to me and said, "Claire, I've realized something. I wasn't just betraying you when I went along with them, I was betraying myself. I let them control me for so long, I didn't even know who I was anymore." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw not the man who had betrayed me, but the man who was trying to rebuild himself. He followed through on his promises too. He stopped letting his parents pressure him into family obligations. When Margaret tried to guilt him about missing an event, he told her plainly, "I prioritize my marriage now. That's not up for debate." Hearing him say those words gave me a strange sense of peace. It didn't erase the past, but it showed me the future could be different. Meanwhile, Rachel and I grew closer. She confided in me often, telling me things she couldn't tell anyone else. "Jason doesn't listen to me," she admitted one evening over dinner at my penthouse. "He comes home late, he dismisses my concerns, and when I try to talk about our future, he brushes me off. It feels like I'm invisible." I set down my fork and looked at her seriously. "Rachel, you're not invisible. He just doesn't want to face himself. That's not your fault." She wiped her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if I married him because of the image, not the man. He's so consumed by appearances, by what people think. It's like living in a glass house, where I can't breathe without worrying how it looks to others." Her words hit me hard, because they echoed my own marriage. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Listen to me. You deserve respect. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. If Jason can't give that to you, you have to decide whether you're willing to live without it." She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wasn't ready to make a decision yet. Not long after, Rachel invited me to lunch. When I arrived, she looked pale and tense. "Claire," she whispered as soon as we sat down, "I think Jason is cheating on me." The words hung in the air like a bomb. "What makes you think that?" I asked gently. She pulled out her phone and showed me a string of messages she had found on his laptop. Messages to another woman, flirtatious and suggestive. They weren't explicit enough to prove a full affair, but they were damning enough. My heart ached for her. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." She covered her face with her hands. "I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more. He gets defensive whenever I ask where he's been. He guards his phone like it's Fort Knox. I don't know what to do." "First," I said softly, "don't blame yourself. Second, decide what you want. Do you want the truth, no matter how much it hurts? Or do you want to look the other way and live with the doubt?" She lowered her hands, her eyes red. "I want the truth. I deserve the truth." I nodded. "Then don't stop until you find it. But remember, you don't need Jason to define your worth. You're strong enough on your own." Our friendship deepened after that. Rachel leaned on me, the way I had leaned on Laura during my darkest days. I realized that sometimes strength comes from knowing you're not alone. Meanwhile, Michael kept proving himself in small ways that added up. One night, after dinner, he said, "Claire, I want to start over." Not as if nothing happened, because something did happen, and we have to acknowledge it. "But I want to rebuild from the ground up. Will you let me court you again?" The idea made me laugh at first, but he was serious, and so, slowly, he began to date me again. He planned little evenings out. He wrote me notes. He listened. To merely listened. At first, I kept my guard up, but over time, I began to lower it. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't forgive him overnight, but brick by brick, he was rebuilding what he had broken. One evening, Rachel called me in tears. "Claire, I confronted Jason. He admitted everything. He said it wasn't a big deal, just texting, but I don't believe him. I don't think he'll ever change." "Rachel," I began, but she cut me off. "I'm leaving him," she said firmly. "I deserve better. I deserve the kind of respect you've demanded for yourself. Watching you stand up to this family gave me the courage needed." "Thank you." When I hung up, I sat in silence, overwhelmed. I thought about how far I'd come, from being excluded from that wedding to becoming a source of strength for someone else. Life was messy, complicated, full of pain and healing. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Rachel didn't waste time after that phone call. Within a week, she packed her things and moved out of the house she had shared with Jason. She filed for divorce not long after. The news shook the Anderson family like an earthquake. Margaret was horrified, Edward was furious, and Jason acted like it was all a misunderstanding. "It was just texting," he argued, "not an affair." But Rachel stood firm. She wasn't going to minimize her pain for his convenience. She called me almost every day during that time. Some days she was angry, other days she cried. "Claire," she whispered one night, "I don't know if I would have had the courage without you. Watching you demand respect made me realize I could too." Her words made me realize something important. Sometimes standing up for yourself gives others permission to do the same. Meanwhile, my own marriage reached a crossroads. Michael kept trying. He was consistent, patient, and honest. He didn't just say he wanted to change, he showed it. He respected my boundaries, he defended me to his parents, and he never pushed me to forgive before I was ready. But trust doesn't rebuild overnight. There were still moments when I looked at him and remembered the sting of his betrayal, the way he had brushed me aside like I was nothing. One evening, after a therapy session, I asked him bluntly, "Why do you want to stay married to me, Michael? Is it guilt? Is it pride? Or is it love?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "It's love, and it always has been." I just let fear blind me. Fear of disappointing my parents, fear of not fitting into their mold, fear of losing their approval. But Claire, losing you scared me more than all of that combined. That's when I finally realized what mattered. His words were raw, but I needed more than words, so I decided to test his actions. A few weeks later, my company held a groundbreaking ceremony for our newest hotel project in Chicago. It was a high-profile event, with press, investors, and government officials in attendance. Normally, I handled such events alone, but this time, I invited Michael to come with me, not as my shadow, not as the man who once undermined me, but as my partner. When we arrived, he stayed quietly by my side, never interrupting, never trying to take over. During my speech, he stood proudly in the front row, clapping louder than anyone else. When reporters asked him questions, he redirected them back to me. "This is Claire's vision," he said. "I'm just here to support her." That night, after the ceremony, I turned to him in the hotel suite. "You did well today," I admitted softly. He smiled. "I wasn't trying to do well. I was just trying to be what you deserve." It was in that moment that something shifted inside me. For the first time since the wedding, I believed him, not just his words, but his heart. Still, I knew our marriage couldn't go back to the way it was. It had to evolve, or it would die. So one evening, I sat him down at our dining table. "Michael, I need to be honest. I'm not the same woman you married. I've grown, I've changed, and I won't shrink myself ever again to fit into your family's expectations. If we stay married, you need to accept me fully as I am." He reached across the table and took my hand. "That's all I want, Claire. The real you. I don't want you to shrink. I want you to shine." Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't pull away. We weren't perfect, but maybe we didn't need to be. Meanwhile, Rachel's divorce was finalized. She moved into a stylish apartment downtown and started fresh. One evening, she invited me over for wine as we sat on her balcony overlooking the city. She said, "You know, Claire, when I first met you, I thought you were quiet, invisible even. I thought Margaret was right about you not fitting in. But now I see you're the strongest person I know." I laughed softly. Strong doesn't mean unbreakable. It just means I refuse to stay broken. She clinked her glass against mine. "Here's to refusing to stay broken." We drank, and for the first time, I felt like I had a true sister. In her dot not long after, Michael asked me on what he called a second first date. He showed up at my penthouse with flowers, dressed in the same kind of suit he wore when we first met. "Claire Anderson," he said with a small smile, "would you do me the honor of having dinner with me?" I couldn't help but laugh, but my heart warmed. "Yes, Michael, I would." We went to a small Italian restaurant, the kind with candles. On the tables and checkered tablecloths, it wasn't flashy or grand, but it was real. We talked for hours, not about business, not about family drama, but about our dreams, our fears, our hopes. When he walked me back to my building, he paused outside the door. "Claire," he said softly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I don't want to face it without you." For the first time, I believed him. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding the future matters more than the past. Wasn't ready to say everything was fixed, but I was ready to say we had a chance. A full year after Jason and Rachel's wedding, I stood once again inside the Somerset Grand. But this time, it wasn't for family drama or damage control. It was for me. We were hosting a leadership conference for women in business, something I had dreamed of for years. The ballroom was filled with entrepreneurs, executives, and students eager to learn. As I looked out at them, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. When I stepped up to the podium, I spoke from my heart. A year ago, I was standing in this very room, being told I wasn't good enough to sit at my husband's side. I almost let that moment break me. But instead, I found my voice. I want each of you to remember you don't need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. You don't need to shrink yourself to be accepted. Stand tall, claim your worth, and never let anyone convince you otherwise. The audience erupted in applause. And in that moment, I knew why I had turned my pain into purpose. Afterward, Michael found me backstage. He looked proud, but also humbled. "Claire," he said softly, "you amaze me, every single day." I smiled at him, but I didn't rush into his arms. We weren't the fairy tale couple people might imagine. We were two flawed people trying to rebuild, and that was okay. Later that evening, we sat on the balcony of our newly renovated home. The city lights sparkled in the distance, and for once, the silence between us felt comfortable. Michael broke it first. "Claire, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "Do you think we'll make it?" Truly, his voice was quiet, almost childlike. I thought about everything we'd been through, the betrayal, the pain, the nights I cried alone. But I also thought about the therapy, the effort, the small gestures that had started to rebuild my trust. I thought about the way he defended me to his parents now, the way he respected my independence, the way he no longer asked me to dim my light so his could shine brighter. "I don't know what the future holds," I admitted, "but I know this seam not afraid anymore. If we make it, it'll be because we choose each other every single day. And if we don't, I'll still be okay, because I've found myself again." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Then, I'll spend every day proving I choose you." It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't fireworks or dramatic music. It was quiet, steady, and real. And somehow, that meant more. Meanwhile, Rachel thrived on her own. She finished her degree, started consulting for nonprofit organizations, and even began dating again. She was cautious, but she was glowing in a way I had never seen before. One evening, she joined me and Laura for dinner, and we laughed until our stomachs hurt. She leaned over and whispered, "Claire, I feel free. For the first time in my life, I feel free." Hearing her say that made every painful step of my journey worth it. Margaret and Edward still tried to weave their way into my life, but I kept boundaries firm. I treated them with polite civility, but I never let them get close enough to hurt me again. Jason avoided me entirely, embarrassed and bitter. That was his choice. As for me, I focused on what mattered: my work, my friendships, my family, and my marriage, in whatever shape it would take. One quiet Sunday morning, I sat in my office at home, sipping coffee and looking at old photos of my parents' bed and breakfast. That little inn was where everything had started. From those modest rooms and simple meals, I had built an empire. But more than that, I had built myself. Michael walked in, holding 2 mugs. He set one in front of me and sat across the desk. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Finally, I said, "Do you know what I've realized?" "What?" he asked. "That I don't regret anything, not even the pain. Because without it, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. I wouldn't have found my strength." He reached across the desk and took my hand gently, and I wouldn't have learned what love really means. We sat in silence after that, sipping our coffee, letting the morning sun stream in through the window. No, we weren't perfect. Our story wasn't neat or easy, but it was ours, and whatever came next, I knew I would face it standing tall, unafraid, and unapologetically myself, because in the end, that was the greatest lesson of all.